That's right. It's time for another riveting edition of the Kaufman Corner podcast. With you, as always, the good doctor, Dr. Rany Jazayerli. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. We are talking Royals baseball, best and worst case scenarios. How does it go incredibly right? Like we saw the best case scenario last year. So how do they top that? Is there even any topping that? Is the best case scenario just what it was last year? What are the particular things that have to happen for it to get better for the Royals? What could happen that would make it the worst case scenario for the Kansas City Royals? We're talking about it right now here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.
This is the Kaufman Corner podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Royals, breaking down the Royals like no one else can. Kaufman Corner is hosted by Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro. Rany is a co-founder of Baseball Prospectus, author of Rany on the Royals, and former columnist for Grantland, The Ringer, and The Athletic. Soren is the award-winning afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. Kaufman Corner is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are your hosts, Rany Jazayerli and Soren Petro.
All right, thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Rany, how about it? I mean, we were talking about best case scenarios last year. Did we really think that we were going to be seeing what we saw? And, I think one of the things, and we always kind of like to talk about like what we kind of got from this exercise, what we learned from going through and preparing for it and trying to figure out, how we were going to come at this. And I think one of the things that maybe last year taught us that I used going into this, right, instead of just maybe learning it all along the way, is learning about what happened last year, is that it didn't all go right for the Royals, and they still took a big step forward. So there's this concept, and it was, one of the biggest jumps we could possibly ever imagine that the Royals made last year. But the idea that literally every single thing has to go right for it to work for the Royals, or for any ball club, I think that's one of the things that I took away from this. That's not really the case. It doesn't have to be every single thing. So armed with that, it was a little bit different looking at this kind of thing going into the 25 season. What did you come away with?
Well, it was definitely, different in the sense that after what we just saw this past season, it's not hypothetical anymore. Like it feels like, oh yeah, this is very much real, and it makes the exercise, I think, that much more interesting because you actually have seen what a manifestation of a true best case scenario looks like. I think it's a healthy exercise to do. Because let's be frank, there are teams out there where even a best case scenario doesn't involve a playoff season or even a 500 season. Whereas you and I both could see a situation. I don't think either one of us were saying best case scenario they're in the playoffs, but we said they could be a contender at the deadline, right? Like I think we both had that in mind. So at least the general, coming from a 106 loss season, right? So the general parameters played out. Yes, there were things happened that you and I could not anticipate, and not everything that we thought had to go right did go right. The other thing, I think, the other lesson I took from it is just how important health is to a best case scenario. Like so much of what happened this past year was just about the 26 guys that they anticipated at the beginning of the season. Almost all of them were healthy for almost all the season. Certainly almost every one of their major contributors. So that's a big part of it. And obviously this year, I think we can dream a lot bigger in terms of what a best case scenario looks like.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing is like how much bigger, right? How far did you go down that road as to how much bigger things? But we should point out we're also going to hit a couple of free agents that we think that the Royals maybe should be taking a look at here as we come down the stretch run of the off season. So we're going to try to squeeze that in, but we'll see. We kind of get going on some of these things and they take off. So I also see a scenario where we get to like just the best, like something like that. But how much better are we looking at in your mind that it can get?
Well, it depends on how you define how good they were last year. If you're talking about record, 86 wins, they can get better. In part because if you look at their Pythagorean win-loss, or if you look at their runs scored, runs allowed, I mean, they were a 91 win team on paper last year. So I don't know if they can get much better than that, but if that's your baseline, they don't have to be much better. Like, to me, when we talk about better, if they win the division, that's anything beyond that is almost irrelevant. Like, if they, I guess you could say if they get a bye, right? If they get a top 2 seed in the American League, but like the only thing that really matters in terms of improvement is going from being a wild card to being a division winner. If they win 94 games or if they win 104 games, I don't think it's going to make much difference in terms of playoff seeding. And that's really all that matters.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's get started. Best case scenario. How do you want to begin?
Well, I feel like we should talk about like the players or the positions on the field where if you had a crystal ball and you could look at one player, one position and how it went this season, where would you want to know if you only had the option of knowing one or two end results? Right? We're not talking about the process, we're talking about the end results that would make you feel the most optimistic about the upcoming season. I mean, if you told me, Cole Ragans goes out there and does what he did in 2024, great, but that doesn't materially change what I think about. Great, he stayed healthy, but I'm talking about somebody we're not sure about, somebody with a high variance, right? Somebody who can go either way. To me, there's one guy to start with that's pretty obvious. I don't know if you want to agree with me.
Fire away.
But for the, I think, 17th consecutive season, I think MJ Melendez having a breakout year would be like, now, I'm not saying it's necessary for the Royals to have a best case scenario, because obviously he didn't have a breakout year in 2024 and they still had a best case scenario. But if you were to tell me right now that MJ Melendez can do what we still think, at least theoretically, he is capable of, at a position where the Royals have an enormous need, and not just one position, but really like left field, right field, DH, like the big weakness of this team in my mind is offensive production from those 3 spots. If you told me that one of those was filled with an MJ Melendez breakout year, I would feel extremely good about the upcoming season.
Do you think that that's a possibility? Right. And I don't say that to be flippant, because didn't even enter my mind. That ship sailed as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think it necessarily should. Like I said, where's he at on his career? Plate appearances and at bats, and he right around the magic 1,500.
Right around there. He's 20. He just turned 26 a month ago. Like he's not old, but he's not young. Right. I think it's top of mind for me in part because just, hope springs eternal, all that crap. I don't know if you saw his Instagram stories from 2 or 3 days ago. He had posted a video of him just taking batting practice. No, there's some music in the background, no commentary, just him taking batting practice. But what was extremely notable about this was
he had a bat.
He had a swing. He had an honest to God swing, Soren. His front leg was pointing towards the pitcher's mound and not all the way to first base.
Okay.
His bat was not like up here and then down here and then where he's got so much load that there's no way you can catch up to a high velocity fastball, and lo and behold, he could not hit high velocity fastballs. His bat was actually on his shoulder while waiting for the pitch. He had eliminated a lot of extra motion. Again, it's batting practice in a cage in some undisclosed location, presumably in Florida, in January. It may mean nothing. He may show up in spring training with the same flawed swing he's had along. But just seeing this and this, he looks normal, which is to say he looks very different. It just makes me think at least somebody has, after 3 years, finally identified, maybe there's something wrong with the way he's swinging the bat, because despite, elite exit velocities, he has an extremely flawed performance. So maybe it was just in my head, but I'm still not willing to give up the ghost entirely on him.
Yeah, I'll say this first. When you say he's taking batting practice, I'm like, well, we did just talk to Vinnie Pasquantino. By the way, if people missed Vinnie Pasquantino, he was on the Coffin Corner podcast last week. Make sure you go back and check it out, because it was a great conversation with Vinnie. We've had a lot of people, by the way, talking about how much they love Vinnie. We sold a lot of Vinnie Pasquantino jerseys by having him on. Let me tell you that I had a lot of people like, I'm going right out. I'm buying a Vinnie Pasquantino jersey. He's now my favorite player. I love that he was on the podcast. It says so much about him. So if you didn't catch last week's, make sure you go back and check it out wherever you get your podcast, because Vinny was great. We appreciate him spending some time with us. And I was going to say, well, Vinny was headed off to hit that day. And we went through his routine, and he lives in Nashville because his agents, facilities are there. And so he can go to the facilities and work out and have baseball workouts and just regular workouts and all that. Like it is a year-round grind nowadays for all players. And so like my first, when you said that, I'm like, well, did I not know that he didn't work out at all? Like he never worked out. He never went to the cages. Like he didn't pick up a bat all off season. Like did I miss something here? So I do love hearing what you're saying. And I will give it an opportunity to succeed, because I remember the year Alex Gordon broke out. I went to spring training and I said, we are not going to go talk to Alex Gordon, because I talk to him every year. I'm like, I'm done with the, hey, is this the year? What have you done? Let's just let it lie. I know the guy works really hard and I'm rooting for him. To be able to say, hey, look, that guy busted his butt. It wasn't easy, but he never quit. He kept trying, kept working, and look how it turned out. And lo and behold, that's what it was. And by the way, that's where I'm at with MJ Melendez. Like, I don't see a need to go have that conversation unless something is done. And to your final point, my final point to what you said somebody's finally recognized. I think everybody, if you and I can recognize, and every one of our listeners can recognize that there's a problem with that swing, they all did. I think it's finally gotten home to MJ Melendez that he's not going to be the player he wants to be or thinks he can be unless he makes changes. And perhaps even the organization said, you have no guarantee of being on this team, or who knows. But I think, the understanding is with him that he can do it. And I agree with you. If he's a 30 home run guy, and I've got something kind of along those lines, but it's not with MJ Melendez. So, I give you credit. Way to go get it. Way to stick with MJ Melendez. I'm proud.
I'm glad you brought up Alex Gordon, though, because it's like, just like we've said in the past, if you're new to the sport and you think, Cole Ragans is a common outcome after a trade, like you don't understand baseball. You don't understand how rare that is. If you look at Alex Gordon and be like, oh yeah, a lot of players will break out, in their fifth year after not just 3, but 4 years, right? MJ's been disappointing for 3, but Alex had 4 disappointing years. Like, if you think it's normal to then turn into a superstar, also, you don't understand this, how difficult this sport is. But we have seen it happen. And I'm not expecting Alex Gordon level greatness from MJ Melendez, right? If only because I know he can't be Alex Gordon with the glove. I'm just saying it's possible, right? It requires a commitment to changing, what's not working. And Alex has long deserved tremendous credit for recognizing that, despite being arguably the best player in the minor leagues, the best college player, getting to the major leagues quickly, like he had to change his approach to succeed in the majors, and doing that. MJ, maybe that's fine. Like you said, maybe it's finally gotten through to him. It's no guarantee of success, but he was never going to succeed without it. So I'm hopeful.
I don't know how to put this one, but I'm going to say the Royals fully embrace the platoon, right? And I think they have. And it works. I should probably say, because I think they have. I think, adding Jonathan India, they want to be on the offense. In fact, I think probably Jonathan India and obviously Bobby Witt Jr. are maybe the only guys that aren't going to have some kind of partner to do-si-do with throughout this season. Vinnie Pasquantino, I think, would be the other guy. Whether it's, partially as DH and first base, Salvy as DH and first base, but
he moves around, right?
But I think the only 2 guys that I'm like, he's at second. The more I see it, and from what I've heard, and this may change on the first day of spring training, when it's like, oh, look at this, Jonathan India's playing third base, or Jonathan India's in the outfield. But I'm just kind of feeling, and I've got some conversations coming up. Maybe I'll learn some more at that time. But I kind of feel like India's going to be at second base, Bobby's going to be at short. Salvy and Vinny are going to be in the lineup, but I think it's first and DH for Vinny, and I think it's catcher DH first for Salvy, right? So I think they're going to kind of shuffle around, but I think the 2 middle infielders are going to be there. Everybody else is going to be a platoon, right? But I'm going to give you one guy that I think starts in that platoon, and he comes out of it being a 30 home run hitter, and that's going to be Maikel Massey. I'm going to say Maikel Massey gets moved over to third, basically platoons with Maikel Garcia. He'll play some at second. Obviously, still India needs a day off, what have you. But India has the splits to play against both, and so I think he'll be there. I think Massey starts as a platoon and then ultimately ends up being a 30 home run hitter as he basically takes over every day. So I'll take Maikel Massey to be the guy that breaks out over, and so if you I'm giving you the scenario on how I think it happens. but I'm going to put him down for the breakout year. Maikel Massey, and Maikel Massey chases 30 home runs.
I can't disagree with that at all. Like, I think right now, if I had to guess, I would say, yeah, Maikel Massey will be a better player than MJ Melendez in 2025, just like he has been.
We're going with best case scenarios,
right?
So there's nothing wrong with your pick.
And the reason I go with Melendez simply because the expectation for Melendez is so low. Like, if I could pick one of those guys to have a 30, you tell me one of these guys is going to have an 850 OPS, let's say, and 500 at bats, and I could pick one of them right now, I pick Melendez because I know that Massey, even if he doesn't break us, he's a good player. The biggest thing with him is, can he stay healthy for 150 games? But yes, he's probably more likely to do it just because we know offensively he can do it. It's a matter of staying healthy. And then, like you said, does he change positions? And we don't know, is he going to move to third? Is he going to move to left? Is India going to move to left third? Is Maikel Garcia going to play? All that stuff we figure will be resolved in spring training. But right now, I'm confident in saying Maikel Massey will be in the everyday lineup if he's healthy. Right?
Okay.
Whereas Melendez, yeah, I mean, there's a scenario where he's released in spring training if he things, he regresses. So absolutely, there's more risk there. I just think the upside. I think the Royals would take that upside even more gladly than they would with Massey because it's so unexpected.
Speaking of guarantees, I guarantee that we've got happy people in my neighborhood because we have secured Gann Asphalt and Concrete to reseal the neighborhood pool. That's right. And of course, we're the proud sponsors here of the Kaufman Corner podcast. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warning. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. All right, let's move on. Number 2, best case. We're gonna have to pick up the pace, or we are just gonna do best case here because we're gonna run out of time. What do you got?
So I want to stay in the outfield because, again, when I talk about things that could derail the upcoming season, derail a potential playoff, repeat, I still look at the corner outfield as the biggest weakness, right? But to me, if there's another breakout from a guy we really haven't given much, we've talked about him some, but I think a lot of Royals fans may not even know he's on the team yet. I would absolutely love to see in a best case scenario, and I think this absolutely could happen, is a breakout year from Joey Wiemer. And this is the guy, as you call the second player in the Singer for India trade, right? We got the outfielder from the Reds, who made his major league debut, played a lot in 2023 with the Brewers, was a former top 100 prospect just 2 years ago. This is not ancient history, but his performance in the major leagues to this point, not great. Has a 201 batting average, 279 on base, 349 slug. He has pop. He has some plate discipline. He has a decent walk rate. He's played a fair amount of center field. I feel like he could play center in the majors, but I think he's better off in a corner outfield and he'd be good defensively in that spot. He can steal bases. He has a lot of skills, but he's coming off kind of a lost season. The Reds liked him enough that they got him in a trade at the deadline last year. For Frankie Montas when they were selling at the deadline. So there's definitely talent here. And the Royals, they need a young, talented outfielder to break out. And if we're hoping on MJ still, but Wiemer's right-handed, so he would also fit in, you said, kind of a platoon role. He's a guy who could, whether it's with Melendez, if he's platooning or giving Kyle Isbel a spell in center field. I don't know exactly know where he's going to play, but he can platoon with multiple options. He could even DH some because the Royals really don't have a full-time DH at this point. But I just feel like he's a guy who, if he gives him 400 at bats and he hits 260 with 20-25 home runs and good defense, that would basically be a good free agent signing. We're going to talk about potential free agent signings, but if they could get that kind of production from Joey Wiemer, that would go a long way towards preventing regression to the mean this year.
Yeah, listen, I will say if he's DHing, there's a real problem. because I think they've got plenty of DH candidates, and I think they're going to need him in the outfield.
Yeah, that's fair.
I mean, because I don't think their outfield defense is very good, other than Kyle Isbel. So, like, I think if in your scenario of him breaking out, I think he damn well better do it in the outfield. I see him as the short side of the platoon in center field, and then even given some time off, against bad, whatever, right swing plane. They get so into the minutia beyond just right versus left and everything,
right?
The swing planes and all those, that he's out in the outfield and he's playing, 400 at bats, one against the left-handers, so that Isbel doesn't have to play there, and he plays center field on those days. But then he probably gets another couple hundred at bats against right-handers, giving days off. And in all likelihood, he'll play that because somebody gets hurt, right? They won't be able to platoon. But in a perfect scenario, I think they'll find some spots. I'd love to see it. I think it's possible. You're right. He's got the pedigree. It's not that far removed. He hasn't been in the big leagues long enough, and he's with a new organization. So that means a new philosophy, new voices around him, and so he's got an opportunity. I think that's a good one. I like it a lot. I will counter you with Vinnie Pasquantino goes 375 on base and 50 doubles. Did you catch when we had him on last week about how he, referenced, hitting doubles, if he could hit a double every time, that's what he'd do. I mean, that to me seems like what it is. He talked about that he had gotten away, he'd gotten pull happy, and he thought that had taken him away from his swing. He mentioned his on-base percentage, and I think that's what he's going to look to do. So I think if you're looking for 30, 40 home runs at him, you're not going to get it, but I think 20 home runs again. But I'll throw him down 50 doubles. I'll be bold. I'll be daring. This is the best case scenario. This is not exactly what I think is going to happen. What do I think is going to happen? He's going to creep up around 345, 350 on the on-base percentage. I think he's going to be around 38, 39, 40 doubles, be around 20 home runs, be a real run producer. But best case scenario, he becomes kind of a force, an on-base force, and they become a really good on-base team with a lot of things. Jonathan India, obviously, at the top of the order, being the biggest change, where they were just god-awful at getting on base. And I think we all expect that to some degree. But I think Vinnie Pasquantino, not just kind of getting back to what we thought he was going to be, but really making a statement. I think that would be really important, because he's going to be the guy hitting behind Bobby.
I completely agree with you. It's like I was almost afraid to pick him in this spot, just because I don't want to be susceptible to confirmation bias. And having him on the show last week, like, he said everything I wanted to hear him say, including the point about, like, how, his approach, he felt like, he acknowledged his numbers were down a little bit last year, and a lot of it was because he was probably trying to sell out for power a little too much, and that when men were on base, men in scoring position, he got back to just trying to make hard contact. And it was reflected in his performance. And I honestly, I don't think you and I, we talked a lot during the season about how, like, the Royals were scoring more runs than you'd expect. Like, they were doing well with runners in scoring position. I don't think we really properly gave Vinny specifically the credit he deserves for his performance with men on base and runners in scoring position. Like what he said, like, bears out perfectly in the numbers. With no one on base, when he said, he was probably trying to hit, a home run every time. He only hit 199 with nobody on base. He did hit 11 homers, right? His pop was there. He slugged 380. With man on first base only, he hit 309. And then with runners in scoring position, like, I knew he did well. I did not realize he hit 360 with a 583 slug. He had 11 doubles, only 6 homers, but 11 doubles and 139 at bats. Like, that comes out to roughly a 50 double pace for a full season. I'll take 40 or 45 doubles if he hits 360 batting average, not on base batting average. Like, I'm not saying, like, when you break down, performance in a small sample size, obviously you can seize on one great sample and say, oh, this is what he can do. I'm not saying that he's capable of doing that for a full year, but it definitely makes you go, that in situations where, power was not as important for the situation as just making good hard contact, he thrived. And if there's any truth to the fact that his approach was different with runners in scoring position, and he just sticks with that approach for every at bat, I think your numbers are absolutely in range. I mean, I think he's proven he's capable of being that kind of hitter. And I think that kind of hitter would be a substantially more productive hitter overall than he was last year. So I fully am on board with your pick.
Okay. Another one for the best case scenario from you.
So for me, the one other scenario I want to talk about on the offensive side is simply that Maikel Garcia takes a step forward. And I'm going to be kind of vague about that because there are many different ways this could go, and partly because we don't even know where he's going to play. I'm going into the season assuming that he has at least a tenuous hold on third base, with the caveat that obviously they could move India or Massey over there, but I feel like right now, barring any more free agent signings, I feel like left field is a more pressing need for the team, and I think they still believe in Maikel's youth, his defense, and his ability. His batted ball metrics suggest somebody who just needs to barrel the ball more. Like, he actually makes good contact, but the angles are all wrong. So I'm hoping he can take a step forward, and if he hits 260 with 12 home runs, like, that would make him actually a pretty good player, and sort of solidify that position and allow the Royals to use India and Massey in other spots, and kind of they can fill other holes with those guys. So I'm going to just say that another healthy, productive season, but like a step forward for Maikel Garcia would actually make a huge difference for this franchise.
Okay. I will go. I don't see it. Right. Do we have a video? And a lot of people have, have mentioned, we had a couple of folks, let's see where we have, and somebody said, have you seen the new stage? I was trying to find it now. It's so far back, I can't find it anyway. I apologize. But a number of people in the chat room were talking about the new stance for him. Other people are like, "Come on, enough with Imaging Melendez." I'm kind of there with Maikel Garcia that it ain't happened yet. I don't see it happening. I don't think the pop's ever been there. I don't think the pedigree in it. And I want to point out, I know you said take a step forward. You didn't say breaks out, hits 25 home runs, just takes a step forward. I actually would go the other way on that one and say Maikel Garcia becomes a utility player, because that means somebody else has done it. And I think it's more likely that's where I've got Massey taking over and being the third baseman eventually.
That's fair. Right? Yeah, I mean, he might have more value to the team, even if he doesn't perform necessarily better.
I think that's the more likely path to success from the team, is that Massey does that. I'll go with my third one, is that the Royals acquire the everyday outfielder at the deadline, right? Like, they make a move and get a legitimate bat at the deadline. Now, the Royals generally don't like to just rent players. So, I mean, I think, probably be with a year or two. I don't know who it would be, but they finish off, like, if this is going to be the best case scenario, I think that's going to be what the Royals are a lot, right? They're going to be adding at the deadline. They're going to be using the depth of their farm system to go add and finish off the big league team. And that's the scenario that I see here, getting somebody, and I'm in this best case scenario, I'm talking about they're getting, Jermaine Dye before he's become Jermaine Dye, that type of deal where they're grabbing a guy, and that's where, to your Wiemer,
I was just about to say, if you wanted to create a Jermaine Dye, like the Michael Tucker for Jermaine Dye trade, where the Royals got Jermaine Dye, and it actually took 2 years. Like 2 years in, it looked like a bad deal for the Royals, and then turned into one of the best deals they've made in the entire 1990s. Joey Wiemer fits that profile. He kind of does. Like, I'm not. Not everybody. In fact, most people who look like Jermaine Dye in a trade are not going to be Jermaine Dye. But yes, that they may have already found that guy. Like, my hope is they already got that guy.
Yeah. I think it speaks to it. I'm not as sold. I just see Wiemer as a piece, but that they go and get the everyday guy here. By the way, Blake likes your the difference with Garcia. He's already a speed and defense that makes him valuable, even with his bat as it currently is. Agreed. But if his bat comes around, then you really do have something there. It's a fair point. All right, that's three each. What do you got next?
So I'm going to go on the pitching side now. Okay. And we'll talk about the rotation. But the rotation, like I said, if they just hold serve, that's incredible. So to me, I'm looking more at the bullpen, and we are talking best case scenarios here. So don't laugh at me. I recognize that this is unlikely. But I think we've established.
Are you going to say the words Asa Lacy?
No.
Okay.
I was actually about to say, like, I was just about to say, I'm staying in the realm of possibility, so I'm not bringing up the words Asa Lacy. No, God, no. I was going to say though, Lucas Ursegui established himself as if he does what he did as a Royal last year, like phenomenal. But if we want a second guy to really step up, you have Kris Bubic. He might be moving into the rotation. You have Daniel Lynch. We've talked about him too. But the guy who I think would be a surprise, like big time contributor, who still has the ability but is high risk, it's Carlos Hernandez. Okay. Carlos Hernandez taking a step forward, mainly with his command. Because, the fastball velocity is there. It's a little too straight. Like maybe he comes up with a little wrinkle on a new pitch. That might be another thing that would be nice to see from him. But having him be, the guy he was for that 2-month stretch in 2023 when he was like one of the best relievers in baseball and then completely, just turned into one of the worst relievers in baseball for the last 6 weeks of the season. But I think a breakout from Carlos Hernandez would give the Royals like that, a second like absolute power arm in the bullpen, and would allow everyone else to take a step back, in terms of their role and fit a role even better. So Daniel Lynch, you don't have to rely on him as much in the late innings. He's your middle inning guy or whatever. I think that could be a really big bump up for the Royals. So Carlos Hernandez is the guy I'd love to see have a breakout year.
Okay. I will go with Kris Bubic becomes the Royals' second best starting pitcher. I think the strikeout to walk ratio that he has shown as a reliever has been dominant. We expect that to back up a little bit, right, with the strikeout numbers come down. But 2 years ago, what was it, 16-2 strikeout to walk ratio in the limited time we saw before he broke down. He's not going to overwhelm people, but he's got a good pitch mix now. He's got some experience. He's felt success. No one's going to ask him to go 7 or 8 innings anymore. So I think he could be a nice 6-inning guy that they regularly get good usage from and get him out of there. If he does that, and I think for the best case scenario, because there's no way Michael Wacha and Seth Lugo, in my opinion, are going to stay as healthy as they were last year. Now, Michael Wacha did have the fracture in his heel and was out for a little bit. But for the most part, I mean, all the starts that they got, all of them collectively are not going to be that good. And I think there is a lot of peripheral data that says Kris Bubic can be pretty good. And if he realizes that takes the pressure off Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha to repeat what they did last year. And I think it just gives them 2 dominant lefties at the top of their rotation, which makes them really difficult on a lot of teams.
Absolutely. No, I mean, my next one really is essentially what you're saying, which is I was going to say Kris Bubic and Alec Marsh stay healthy for the entire year. Like just give me those 2 guys combining for, let's say, at least 55 starts. And for one thing, that takes the pressure off of Ragans, Lugo, and Wacha to have to stay healthy for 162 games for a second straight year, with the exception of the one freak fracture for Wacha. So if one of those guys goes down with an injury or whatever, at least it's not 2 or 3 parts of your rotation that you're having to fill in mid-year. But I'm confident, like if Bubic stays healthy, if you just tell me he's healthy enough to make 28 starts, throw 150 innings this year, I'm confident. Maybe I don't know if he'd be a number 2 starter, but number 3 starter, absolutely. Like I think the talent is absolutely there. My hope really more is with Marsh taking a step forward, like because he's so close. He's this close to being at least a mid-rotation guy. His ERA was more like a number 4, number 5 starter. I think his peripherals were a little bit better than that though. And he took such a big step forward from his minor league performance. And he dealt with some injuries and was out of the rotation for a little while and came back. So if he can just stay healthy, I feel like he might also be a number 3. So you're saying Bubic should be a number 2. I guess my dream is that both Bubic and Marsh are basically number 3s and healthy number 3s. That would be enormous in preventing any kind of regression from the other guys in the rotation.
Right, which is part of what we're doing for a best case scenario is that they've invested in trying to make the offense better. Just don't lose anything out of the rotation. Get better in the bullpen. The bullpen and the batting are where they've got the best chance to move forward and succeed. My next one is a starter emerges from the farm system to boost the rotation down the stretch, right? Because I think somebody's going down. I'm counting on Alec Marsh to be in that rotation, but somebody, whether it's Marsh or Bubic or Reagan, somebody will go down, and they're going to need somebody that we're not talking about right now to step in and be part of the equation.
I hope you're right. I'm still a little skeptical that this is the year the Royals come up with that guy. I feel like we're still a year away from seeing somebody. I mean, Noah Cameron is the guy everyone's talking about, and I think he could be a good fill-in. I don't think he has the upside of a Marsh or a Bubic. I think he's a number 4 starter at best.
Well,
Ben Kudrna is probably the guy that's most likely. So but it would require him to come in the spring and have like more velocity or something new about him. He's taken a step forward. Right now he has promise, but the ability is still not there yet. The promise is that the ability increases. Like he's a better pitcher in 2025 than he was last year. And I think he's 22 years old. Like it's very possible that will happen, but they really need somebody to take a step forward in the farm system. And I think Kudrna is probably your best bet.
Yeah, and I'm almost of the opinion it's not Cameron, right? Like I think it almost has to be somebody else that's got higher end. Somebody locks in with their control that's got bigger stuff. Somebody learns a new pitch that becomes their strikeout, swing and miss pitch, and somebody rockets through the organization. I think they're going to need, and if nothing else, just we know the system's going to have to be better this year, just to give them the ammunition to go make deals, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
All right. Do we want to go to worst case scenario? Right.
Unfortunately, I feel like we are obligated to do so.
Okay. Let's do this. Then we will give you our worst case scenario. First, though, we remind you we're always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear in KC since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liability in your parking lot. Get your lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot will cut down on accidents and keep your lot as safe as possible. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. We've given you the good, now the bad. What does the worst case scenario look like, Rany?
I mean, it's a cliche, but the Royals were unusually healthy last year. And, any injury is going to hurt. And obviously, Bobby Witt misses 2 months or whatever. You think about how valuable he was. Basically 2 All-Stars in 1 last year. So if he misses half a year, it's like losing an All-Star. But specifically, if we talk about an injury that, we're not necessarily thinking of, but if Cole Ragans or Seth Lugo were to, have I don't even say season-ending injury, but miss 2 to 3 months out of the season, and I don't know. It's certainly going into the year, I'm not sure that the Royals have the depth to weather that kind of storm. They really need the guys who can give them 6 or 7 innings and give up 2 runs consistently. That's what made this team go last year, and I feel like an injury to either of those guys would just be devastating early in the year.
Either being Ragans or Bobby.
Oh no, Ragans or Lugo specifically, on the pitching side. Bobby is in his own category, obviously.
Okay. So. Mine was Ragans or Bobby gets hurt.
Okay.
That to me is they had both those guys all year, and partially why I say Ragans as opposed to Lugo because I expect Ragans to maintain more of that elite ability, and so it's one of those guys gets hurt for a long portion of the season. They can't make it up. I mean, I don't think they can make it up. I definitely don't think they can make up Bobby. Right? I don't see where they get beyond that. I don't think people realize just how much. I mean, they know it was a great season, but I don't know that anybody really fully appreciates just how much he meant to the team. So,
I mean, to me, it's the most valuable season in Royals history in the sense. I'm not just talking about WAR, MVP votes, or whatever, but when George Brett hit 390. The Royals won the American League West by 10 or 12 games, and they were up by 18 games in early September and coasted the rest of the month. The Royals made the playoffs by 1 game, and they had, a shortstop who played every single game until they clinched a playoff spot and, won the batting title and had set the franchise record for extra base hits. It's absurd. To me, the fear isn't just that he gets hurt, but what if he kind of does what George Brett did in 1981? What if he just has a fall off that more than you expect? What if he hits 270 with 24 home runs and he's worth 4 wins instead of 9? Like I said, if he just is half as good as last year, that's you lost an all-star and he's still an incredibly good player. So that's the risk, right? He has to stay at a really, really high level. He's young enough that I expect he'll be close to last year. I don't think he'll be quite that good, but It's so obvious. It goes without saying. If Bobby Witt's not Bobby Witt, we're screwed. Right. So, my next one though is this might be a surprise, but if we're talking about injury or a position where the Royals could really suffer, it's not a guy you think of as being that important. But Kyle Isbel is so important to this team's outfield defense specifically that if Isbel gets hurt or, his bat suddenly becomes unplayable, I don't know what they're going to do in center field. Like Joey Wiemer might be the next option, and he's unproven that he can play center at the major league level. And the corner outfield, we've already talked about how suspect the defense is out there with MJ Melendez. Hunter Renfroe is not getting any younger. Dairon Blanco is like really fast, but like defensively, he's actually, not great.
He's not great in left.
Right, exactly. Nelly Velasquez, but I'm saying even the guys who are, even if they are in the corner outfield, like all those guys need a center fielder who can go get it. Like if you're playing an average to below average defender in center with the corner outfielders the Royals have now, I feel like there's a multiplier effect. Like because you don't have anybody who can cover up the weaknesses in range of the other guys, and this pitching staff cannot afford to have that bad an outfield defense. His defense is already suspect, but Isbel keeps it going. To me, that's a really underrated potential weakness for this team.
Okay. I will counter that and say the Jonathan India move ends up blowing up because they move in positions it doesn't work. He takes bad fielding to the plate. The on-base percentage regresses, and he's okay. He's an improvement, but he doesn't really, fully end up being the solution in center field. Battles some injuries in and out of the lineup, some combination of injuries, moving him around, trying to do too much, looking at the big outfield. It is going to be Kaufman's I think the hope is that Kaufman is a hitter's park and he becomes a doubles machine in addition to getting on base and drawing the walks. And he's scoring a lot of runs in front of Bobby Witt Jr. I think this is worst case scenario. This is not a prediction of what's going to happen, people. If you're joining us late here to the Kaufman Corner podcast, we're going over best and worst case scenarios. So this is part of the worst case scenario. That move has good intentions, but it just blows up. It blows up because they decide Massey's playing second base. They put him in left field. He doesn't take to that. He's a disaster in left field. He takes the bad fielding to the plate, and it just ends up being a really bad addition.
Yeah, that's a great pick because there's absolutely risk with India. There's a reason why he was available, right? For Brady Singer, who like India, really good when everything's going right. But if he didn't have weaknesses, he wouldn't have been available, right? So both teams are trading flawed if very very valuable players, and the positional uncertainty with him just adds to that risk. So that's why, even though I think Massey's a better defensive second baseman, if the Royals decide that they just don't want to add to the risk profile with India and leave him at second base, I could understand that. I would prefer to see him move to outfield, but we don't know for sure he can play the outfield.
Right.
And if that's going to screw up his bat at the same time, and now you've got a guy who's really not contributing on either side of the ball, that's a problem. So yes, that is a risk. It's a risk worth taking, but it absolutely is a risk.
Okay. All right. Next for you.
So next for me, this is, I probably was on my list last year, and it's going to be on my list probably until it happens. But Salvador Perez, the bat goes south quickly. Like when the end comes for him, it may not be pretty. Very impressed with what he did last year, and I think that he's proven he's pushed the end out another year or two, I hope. But he's going to be 35 in May. He's a catcher. He has, caught more games than I don't know if any active player, but like he's definitely at the top of that list. And the problem is if he gets off to an incredibly slow start, if he's hitting 210 with not much power in June, he's the captain. He's Salvy, right? He's the one link to the world champion team. He's played every playoff game the Royals have appeared in since 1985. Like, how easy is it going to be to say, you know what, Salvador, you might not be helping the team playing every single game, that maybe you'll be more valuable in a part-time role of some sort. That's going to be that might be the first like major personnel challenge of Matt Quatrero's career in a way. Finding a graceful way to keep the captain happy while not hurting the team or potentially helping the team. So that's, that's the concern, is that we've all accepted the fact that Salvador Perez is just going to play every single day, even though he's a catcher, and find a way to make that work. Let him play first base, DH, because the bat is worth playing even at first base or DH. But what if it's not anymore? It's a normal catcher. He catches a little less, and he still has a good bat for a catcher. But if his bat is okay for a catcher but terrible for a first baseman, that's not helping the team 162 games a year. So that to me is the worry. So hopefully that's still a year or two away. But if it happens, it's going to be an actual performance problem and a clubhouse potential problem as well.
I remember, if you're catching us via the podcast, you can be a part of the conversation in the chat room on the stream. We do it live Sunday nights at 9 p.m. I want to hit a couple things here. Kurt said, I don't think the Royals can be a playoff team with a consistently bad outfield. They did last year. All right, so that's exactly what they did last year. So, again, we're talking best and worst case scenarios, but they made that work. So there is a path to get there without it. Right, so even if the outfield doesn't get better, everything else just has to be the same, and theoretically they're a playoff team. I would agree with you, Kurt, if your point is, well, I don't think everything else can be that good, right? Like, I don't think the pitching can stay that healthy. Therefore, they got to get better someplace else. The outfield's a logical place for them to be able to get better. There's a lot of room for them to improve. I think that's a pretty good one. Kurt says, I expect 75 to 77 wins. Then you're going to pound the under, because 82.5 is the number on FanDuel right now, right? So just FYI, just to put something in there. Dr. Zhivago, I have a hard time seeing KC back in the playoffs again with the offseason they've had, unless someone unexpected really jumps up. What do they lose? What do the Royals lose in the offseason? Again, I think what Dr. Zhivago is saying there is, listen, they're not going to have that rotation again. So where do they get better? And I don't think they got better. I would point out that Jonathan India, if he's a 350 on-base guy batting at the top of what they had 2, 3, 4, this is where the Salvador Perez thing comes in. And by the way, that's my next one as well. I had it as my last one, but I'll go ahead and take it now since you had it, just so we can keep moving. I had Salvador Perez gets old and becomes a sub-200 hitter. Well, that would be a place where they're backing up. So I think I don't think anyone's saying like they have no shot. But I think there are things like, one, you kind of do expect Salvy to get old. I'm going to tell you a couple of things. One, I thought it looked like he was guessing late and in the playoffs. Like maybe he didn't believe in the bat speed. And so if he did get old, and that happened down the stretch last year and it continues here, that's going to be a problem. And two, the weight. I mean, he was big. He was really big. And, as you get older, it gets harder to take that weight off. So I am quite scared that Salvador Perez, the beeping you hear is his career backing up towards its conclusion this year. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he comes in great shape, and I hope he's got another 30 home run season left in him. I think it'd be great to help solidify his Hall of Fame career. But I do want to point out, like, we're going over the worst case scenario here, and if you're catching us late, these are not predictions. We're saying best and worst case. We'll have predictions later, but we're going through right now. If you're hearing all this negative stuff, it's because we're going through the worst case scenario. All right, what do you got next?
So my last one really is just, bullpens being as volatile as they are, that, if they come out and Lucas Ursig he's not the guy the Royals got late last year. He's more the guy that was with the A's, which was a good but not great reliever. Maybe he's a little homer prone, and nobody steps up behind him. Remember, Hunter Harvey is the guy that the Royals actually gave up maybe more draft capital. Well, probably not as much as they gave up for Ursig, trade capital, but they gave up a lot for Harvey. They gave up the draft pick. And Caden Wallace, and he was, did nothing for the Royals, and then his back went out. They're really hopeful that he's going to be a contributor this year. If he does not step up, and Bubic is moving into the rotation, there's a situation here where they don't really have anybody great behind Ursig, and suddenly this bullpen in the seventh and eighth innings is really, really shaky, and the Royals lose a bunch of games early in the year with their bullpen, and aren't able to sustain the momentum that they had this past year. And, if they're 16-24 or whatever, there's going to be an uphill battle the rest of the way. And then they're going to be in a position where they're tempted to sell at the deadline or whatever. Like that's the thing I could see derailing the season early, is if the bullpen, they can't it doesn't shake out right away. And to me, a Hunter Harvey not showing up in good health and pitching like the Royals thought he would last year would be the main instigator for that.
Yeah, I concur. I don't know what to think of the bullpen, right? Because it was rough most of the year and then really solidified coming down the stretch, but there's not enough of a track record of anybody, there. I'm with you. I think that's a great one. I just had bullpen question mark as like in my list of things where I'm like, okay, what are my possibilities here? And I think that that could be a huge problem, right? Because I don't know how I really don't know how they solidified it and what they did.
I mean, it was a bunch of little things, right? It was obviously the trade for Urseg. Like I give JJ a ton of credit that they had already traded for Hunter Harvey and already didn't look good. Like he wasn't looking healthy, and he double dipped and nailed it with Urseg, right? That really saved the season. I really saved the bullpen down the stretch. Bubic moved in there, Daniel, and then Daniel Lynch coming up, and like nobody expected that for him to not give up a run in September out of the bullpen. But they got a little bit lucky. And I mean, look, it was great. Like they went into the playoffs. We felt as good about the bullpen as we had all year. And then of course, and we can joke about, they lost to the Yankees with Michael Lorenzen pitching out of the bullpen, but they had to beat the Orioles first. And they won a couple of 1-run games against the Orioles. They scored 3 runs in 2 games and swept the O's. And that doesn't happen without great performance from the bullpen. So the bullpen finished the season exactly where you want it to finish, but it took a confluence of some luck and then some guys in roles that we don't necessarily expect them to be in this year. Taking Bubic out of the bullpen, I think it's the right move, but it just means they're vulnerable. And it does mean quietly Hunter Harvey may be one of the most important players on the roster early in the year until they can find who else in the bullpen. Because, John Schreiber, Chris Stratton is still, on the payroll because he has a player option he's exercised. James MacArthur, he might be great.
Zerpa is a roller coaster.
Right, exactly. But I mean, MacArthur has been great. He's been awful. He's been absolutely every bit in between. But none of those guys I want to rely on in the 8th inning on opening day. They need Hunter Harvey to back up Lucas Ursig. And if he does, then I'll feel a lot better about the season.
I will go with and it's just the opposite of what I had on the positives. Vinnie Pasquantino gets hurt early. I mean, they fell apart for about 2 weeks trying to replace him, and they had to go out and make some emergency moves. And credit JJ Picola what he did. Putting together, bringing the 3 guys off the waiver claims was amazing to tape it together and really kind of steady the ship when it looked like they could have plummeted right out of the playoffs. But I think they can't afford, and it's why Salvador Perez and Vinnie Pasquantino, they need all 3 of those guys. Otherwise, somebody else has to step up. And if nobody is stepping up, right, and you can almost put it in, well, no one steps up, the likelihood that they get the kind of production they did out of Bobby, Salvy, and Vinny again is unlikely, right? But in fact, Salvy's way overdue for a regression as a catcher and at his age and size. Pasquantino, I know he didn't like the injury-prone thing, and he pointed out, and I think there are some fluke things. Last year he wasn't hurt until a guy ran into his thumb, So I do think that, so I'm not predicting that he's going to get hurt, but if he does, and especially if it's early, it torpedoes the offense. So I think Pasquantino's health is a giant part of the equation for the Royals.
Yeah, no, we are not going to the playoffs with a full season of Tommy Pham and Yuli Gurriel. Many thanks to them, but yes, I completely agree. Like again, health is it's such a cliche, but it determines everything. You stay healthy for a full season. If you tell me right now that the Royals will be generally healthy like they were last year, I will predict them to make the playoffs. Right now, I feel like they are. The expecting that is unrealistic, and with typical health luck, I think the Royals are probably, you said 82 to 83 wins. That's about where I have them, which is probably not enough. Close enough that one big breakout might be enough. One big free agent signing. We can talk about that. If not this week, maybe next week. There's still some guys out there, but they need a little bit of a breakout from somebody in order to make 2025 as successful as 2024 was.
Okay. You got one more?
That was it for me. I think.
All right, I got one more.
Health. So
yeah, health. I got one more. It is that the system doesn't help, right? Like there isn't anybody that's percolating right there that you're like, well, we're expecting this guy on this date. They did get help last year. Lynch came up and helped them with a decent start early and then being part of the equation in the bullpen. A number of guys in the pen kind of came up from there. They didn't get a huge contribution anywhere, and there's no way you can do that year after year. Somebody from the organization is going to have to come up, and I mentioned that from the starting pitchers. That I think they're going to need somebody that we're not talking about to come in and really figure something out, to come in with a new pitch and rock it through the system. Somebody from that system is going to have to come up and help. And whether that's, Blake Mitchell finishes off and takes off, whether that's Carter Jensen, whether that's whoever it is, somebody is going to have to really put it all together, be ready to be a big leaguer and come up and help this team.
Yeah, that's a good one. Like I didn't think of it in part because I'm not even sure that's worst case scenario, because I look at the farm system and I'm like, I don't expect them to have a major contribution. By major meaning basically an everyday player in the lineup.
But don't you agree that they can't progress?
100%.
Yeah.
We don't know. The hope is they'll get there soon.
Yeah.
I think, but like you said, Daniel Lynch coming up, like I've mentioned his name before, but Steven Cruz is a guy who I actually am really hopeful will, impress in spring training, make the bullpen out of spring training, and could be that guy by late in the year that actually you're trusting in late inning situations. But beyond that, it's really, it's some of the, at the beginning of the year, at least, you're talking about some of the AAA guys. Again, their AAA team had a terrific record last year and no prospects. But does Nelly Velasquez come back and actually start hitting like he did in 2023? Nick Prado, I think, he's still there. Could somebody, but that's what you're kind of hoping for early in the year. The second half of the season, Carter Jensen, I think, I may be his biggest fan, but I think that there may be a role for him. The problem is he catching? The position is an issue. And then of course the dream scenario is, Jack Hecleone, who goes into the season, he's being ranked as the best first base prospect in the game by some, by some organizations. I'd like to see him be the best outfield or best right field prospect of the game, but that might be too much to ask for. But if he gets to midseason and he is rocketing up the minor leagues, he's in AAA, he's one of the top 10 prospects in baseball, and he can make an impact in July or August. That's your absolute best case scenario, that Jack Hecleone is in the starting lineup by August. But that seems, it's a best case. Hey, we're talking best case scenario, so that would be great. But the worst case scenario is nobody.
Yeah. All right. That's our best and worst. We've taken it. Do we want to hold off on the free agents?
We were right at an hour. I think this is.
Yeah.
This is a good.
We've done all we can do. We have some free agent stuff. We'll probably do that next week. We've got some other guests we're going to be talking about as well. We're always brought to you here on the Kaufman Corner podcast by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Parking lot problems, they've been making them disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot. That's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. For the good Dr. Rany Jazayerli, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Kaufman Corner podcast.